there, and welcome back to Help My Business is Growing, a podcast where we explore how to grow and build a business that is healthy and sustainable. I'm your host, Kathy Svatina. Branding is one of the first things that we notice about any business. And while there's a lot of advice on establishing a brand identity when you're just starting your business, but what happens when you have to rebrand further down the line because you've grown? So, rebranding, while similar to branding, is a different process. And it's when a company decides that its current marketing strategy and brand identity might no longer be the right fit, so it's time to refresh. And while it sounds simple enough, it can be a veritable minefield of disaster if you don't do it right. And as I always say, whatever you do in the business, at the end, it will always end up in your finances. So you want to make sure that when you're doing this, you're doing this in the right way, not just because it's going to affect your business down the line, but also because rebranding and branding in general comes with a significant cost as well. So you want to make sure that you're using those funds well. So an effective rebrand will not only provide your company with a new logo or look, but you're also going to get a new brand identity that it's more aligned with your business's values and the services that you provide to your customers now that you have actually grown. And it can harness goodwill and enthusiasm for your employees. You can attract more customers, and it will set you up for further business growth and success, meaning that you will also, more likely than not, have more profit and more cash. So see, everything is related. So every single thing that we talked about on this podcast, it really is related to finances. So the question is here, how do you start an effective rebrand? And just a quick reminder, if you want to take home some of the informative tips from our guests today, and trust me, there's a lot of them, all of the episodes on this podcast, including this one, come with timestamps for topics that we discussed, and each one comes with its own blog post as well. You can find all the links and the detailed topics in this episode's show notes. So our guest today is Kelly Wittman. Kelly is a brand strategist, visual designer, and owner of Witt & Company, a brand strategy and design studio that helps small business owners amplify their purpose through consistent and cohesive branding. Prior to the unplanned start of her business in 2017, she spent 6 years in marketing, in event management, and fundraising, specifically in the nonprofit and startup space. Now, she happily wears the title of unemployable, is proud to have a business that supports her life, and is on a mission to help entrepreneurs create their vision of success. Join us. Welcome to the show, Kelly.
Hi, Kathy. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much for being here. You're a branding expert, and there's a lot of branding advice out there for new businesses that are just starting or they're new on the branding journey. And before we started this conversation, we talked about that there's not much guidance when you already have an established business and are actually looking for a rebrand, because that might be a different process. So what I really wanted to focus on this conversation is rebranding. Like, is it needed? Why do you do it? When do you do it? How do you do it? Like, all about the rebrand. So given that when people come to you for rebrands, what is it that triggers it? What are some of the issues that happen in their business that triggers that rebrand?
Oh, I love this topic so much. And this is really where, to your point, where my studio really supports business owners. And I want to start with getting on the same page, or at least articulating how we define your brand, which then helps to articulate and understand when it's a good time to rebrand. So when I think about the idea of brand, it's how people think, feel, and act in relation to your business. So the rebrand process then is really intentionally changing those thoughts, those feelings, those actions, the perception of your brand. And if you're in this space of, okay, should I, shouldn't I? The number one question that I love to ask clients is, why is your current brand not working? And that usually guides us into that conversation around, are you not attracting the right clients? Are you not able to get yourself out there and show up for your business in a way that really excites you? A very tangible not is if you're scared or embarrassed to send people even to your website because it really doesn't portray the experience that you want people to have, or the amazing work that you're doing. So it's really getting to this idea of your current brand is not serving you and it doesn't accurately reflect the work that you do or the experience that you want people to have.
And when we talk about branding, I know a lot of people think about, the colors, the logo, the website, and these are all kind of, well, at least visible, if not tangibles.
Right.
But is there something else that someone should think about? Is there a certain feel? Like, how do you change how people think about your brand and how they're feeling in terms of? I know you can go through different logos and websites, but there anything else that you could be thinking of that maybe it's not so obvious?
Yes. Oh, this is such a great question. And you're right. When we think of branding, we often think of the external brand. But I like to define your brand and really and help you visualize your brand from an internal perspective. So, what goes on behind the scenes. And then the external perspective is what people see externally, which is the logos, the fonts, the colors, the website. So, oftentimes when we get to this space of my brand isn't serving me any longer, it's usually because the internal brand, so what happens behind the scenes, isn't up to date. And this is everything from your strategy. So, what is the communication plan for your brand? Your messaging. So, how are you articulating that communication plan? And then your personality. So, I use with my clients a principle called seasonal brand theory, which really helps you identify what is your brand's personality. And then together, those three elements are really help to guide and reinforce and embody the external. So, based off of your strategy, based off of your message, based off of your personality, all of that internal work behind the scenes, we then create aligned visuals. So, usually, what clients will see is the external brand isn't serving them. So, the logo doesn't feel right. The colors really aren't embodying the feelings that they're looking for. Like I said, the website, they're embarrassed to send people to there. That's usually the external facing stuff. But the problem is most often behind the scenes that internal work has shifted and the organization trajectory is shifting. And that's why the externals no longer are serving them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, it does. And you talked about also a little bit about the personality. And usually the businesses that I work with, they're not small, but they're small in a, I guess, in a, if you compare them to like a Fortune 500 company. So, I mean, they've already had 1 million to 10 in revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And there's usually a founder that has a personal taste and they really like certain things. And what I notice is that a lot of people struggle with balancing their personal taste versus the clientele that they're trying to serve. So what's the balance between there? Like what should you be like focusing? How do you marry those two? That's my question.
That's such a great question. And a very common problem that a lot of organizations, again, when we get to this idea of growing and scaling, face separating the personal and the founder from the brand. So I like to think of them as two separate entities. We have the personal brand of the founder, and then we have the brand personality of the business. And that's really where you get to make that decision. And it's a challenging one, but as the founder, you get to decide how much of your personality do you want in your business and how much of your personality do you want to be the founder. So the benefit of keeping them distinct is often when you get to that scale, you have and will have other team members representing your brand on your behalf. It's not just you anymore. So when you can really clearly articulate the personality of your brand, it helps you then streamline and scale and grow while maintaining that consistent and cohesive experience externally. So regardless if you have a copywriter writing website copy on your, writing copy on your website, or you have a graphic designer creating graphics for social media, when you have a consistent well articulated brand personality, they'll be able to do their job with consistency while maintaining that experience, and it doesn't have to be you. So yes, keep them separate and you get to decide. And that's part of the process of really honing in on what is my brand all about, making those decisions of what you want that experience to be.
And how would this look like in practicality of when you're trying to put your brand on paper, so to speak, when you're trying to communicate exactly, this is my brand, this is what I stand for. How does this look like? Do you have a document somewhere? How does this in practicality look like, especially if you started building the business as a personal brand and now you have to go and make sure that everyone is on the same page. Because I always like to say, like, the best way in business is if you have everyone on the same page, whether it be finances, operations, marketing, whatever it is, so that everyone's going into the same direction. Otherwise, as you know, people go in their own little alleys and, there's a mess, right?
Yes. And to your point, getting everyone on the same page, especially when it comes to that internal brand, is to literally write the page. So oftentimes, what I find with my clients is they have their brand in their head. They know what it's all about. And that's the challenging piece of taking it out of their head and actually putting it on paper. It can be very nerve-wracking because that means you have to actually make the decision. However, that's really, from a practical standpoint, how you really create a brand that supports your business and that other people can then utilize to have that consistent experience. So when we work with clients, we give them two separate documents. The first is their brand playbook, and this really digs into their strategy. So as I mentioned, that communication plan, which is who are you serving, really defining and articulating that ideal client, the target market. Why does the work matter? So getting clear on, okay, are you showing up day in and day out? This really gets into the values that you hold sacred as a business. What are you offering? So it's not necessarily the tangible deliverables, but really the transformation. So yes, we're selling branding support, but the transformation is that we're giving our clients implementation, documentation, so that they're excited to show up for their business. So it's not just those deliverables. And then that last component of how do you want people to feel when they experience your brand? So getting into those adjectives of, I want them to feel excited or calm or relaxed or organic, natural, getting into those adjectives that really help to define the personality. The second half of that playbook is the messaging. So what is the common thread that's woven into all of your brand communication touch points? And what are the beliefs that you hold true as a brand? What are those narrative shifts that you want people to make because of coming in contact with your brand? So that's the playbook. And then we also will provide, which I recommend doing as well. Both of these are things that you can do on your own. Yes, you can hire support, but these are great reference guides and documents that you can have to circulate within your team. The other half of that is your brand guidelines. And that's more of the visual, the external facing of, this is how we use our logo. This is the variations that we have with our logo. These are the colors that we use. These are the colors. This is how we use the colors and the pairings, things like that. So by having both the internal and the external, you're able then to give them to your team that they can reference, whether you're hiring employees or you have contractors, to really maintain that consistency. Because again, when we get back to this idea of what is a brand, it should be supporting your business. And the way that it does that is by creating a consistent, cohesive experience that builds trust with the right people.
And let's say that you've done the work, you have the playbook now, you have rebranded, you've gone through all this, and it probably takes months, I would guess, to do this. How do you know that it has been successful? And when would you see the results of that? Because my assumption is that it's not immediate. It's not like today I'm going to rebrand and tomorrow there's going to be people knocking down my door saying how much I love my brand. So what is that timeline that you think is reasonable to see that the rebrand is working and that it's doing well?
That's such a great question. And I'm going to give the answer that's everyone hates, and it depends. I think it depends on the size of the organization. So if you're a large organization with a large team, there's going to be a ripple effect as people start implementing what the brand is all about and the changes. Versus if you're a small organization and you're relatively agile, you can make the changes quickly and you'll see the results easier or quicker, right? And they're more effective. And it also depends on your audience size in terms of, is there a wide audience and or that it takes more to build that brand awareness? Or if you have a smaller audience that's more engaged with your organization. So it depends, but I always recommend at least give it a year, because to your point, it does take several months to go through the rebranding process and to do it well. Yes, you can go out there and get a new logo and say that you've rebranded, but if you're actually going in and doing the internal work and then pushing it out externally, it does take a while. And the other piece of that is then getting the team on board and making sure that they understand, why did we do this in the first place? And what are these new expectations for creating that consistent brand experience? So I would say a year, just to make sure that everything has really been ingrained and that new experience is what you want. That being said, I've seen and I've experienced in myself when we've gone through our own rebranding, when you are excited about your business and you're excited about the way that it looks and you have clarity on what you're saying, I think you can see results fairly quickly, specifically as the founder or even the team. When you create that consistent experience, people understand what you're all about and they build that trust and they actually get what you're doing as a brand. So it's easier to take action. It's easier for them to take that next right step because they get it. The message is clear, whether they go to your website, whether they see a webinar, whether they meet you in person, whether they go to social media, when they have that consistent experience, which is usually one of the catalysts for we need to rebrand, is because our messaging is all over the place. Our visuals are all over the place. When you have that consistency, everything else gets more streamlined and your audience is better able to understand what you're all about and take that next right step.
Have you seen rebranding that has gone exceptionally well? And I like to ask this because I always like to see, the two sides, things that have gone wrong and things that have gone like exceptionally well, so that people understand like what are some of the things that they should be really, really careful about when they're doing the rebranding, and what is the result when it goes like really, really well. So if we can focus on like really exceptionally well done branding and what has it done for the client.
We're actually working with an organization right now. They're a nonprofit based here in Minneapolis, and it's going, I'll share why it's going really well. Even as we're in the process, the whole team is on board, specifically the comms team. So yes, I'm working directly with the development director, but the executive director is getting in on workshop calls. The other three participants on the communications team, the development director, fundraising team, they're all bought in, which is what helps to support an entire rebrand. The other piece that, and the feedback that we've gotten from them, is that they're able to better articulate their work and understand who they're really talking to. So we're in the middle of the website process, and something as simple, it's simple, right? But it's not an easy question,
Yeah.
is to help them define what is the primary goal of your site. And getting even that clear on that one question will again streamline all of their communication, what goes into their website, what's not in their website, and getting everyone on the same page so that the entire brand is working in the same direction, rather than having one department talk about this as the most important piece of the brand, one department talk about this, and having all of those more siloed effect rather than getting everyone on the same page.
That's interesting. The goals of the website. Can we talk a little bit more about that? Like,
Yeah.
what are some of the different goals that people can have in the website, and how does that drive how the website is done?
I'll use them as an example. So, as a nonprofit organization, there's a lot of different stakeholders, right? And even as a service provider, or if you're selling software, there's a lot of, generally, there's more than one purpose or intent for having a website. And why we ask that question is to define what is the primary goal. Is it to serve donors? Is it to get people to book a consultation call? Is it to get them to sign up for your email list because that's the primary revenue driver of your business? Is it to have podcast downloads because podcast sponsors are the way that you make money? So thinking through what is the number one goal that your website should be supporting, and laying out and being intentional about the content and the calls to action that you have on your site that support that goal. So it's, if I say my primary goal is to have someone book a consultation call with me, I should make sure that front and center when someone gets to my homepage, that's the number one call to action that is there. So they know without a doubt that is their next right step that I am guiding them on. I think about the website as really a story and a roadmap for how someone engages with your business. So thinking about what is that number one action, and then what's the secondary that my website should be supporting. Oftentimes, I think we have our website and we just throw information up there and not realizing that the website is one of the best tools for you to utilize to support you in your business, as long as you're strategic and intentional about what it needs to be doing.
And let's talk a little bit about, we talked about if someone wants to book a consultation that you want
Yep.
to drive them towards, but how is that different from, let's say, if your goal is to get people on the email list? How would those two websites differ? A consultation versus an email list. What would they look like in reality? Like when you go on them, how would that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. Even as simple as would consider the header area. So above the fold, right? So before you start scrolling, language, if the primary goal is to have someone book a consultation call, I would say I can use, my own business for example. So it's brand strategy and design services for purpose-driven businesses, and then the call to action right underneath is let's work together. Versus if my newsletter is the primary function of my business, I'll go to a website and say, join, 15,000 other great business owners who find value in what the branded chat is all about. And then join the newsletter is the primary call to action above the fold. So again, it's just thinking through something as simple as before people start scrolling, what do they see when they first get to your website? And what is that main call to action that you're driving them towards? And then in terms of the actual content as they're going through the site, I would make sure that I have more calls to action about booking a call or joining the newsletter as we're going through and as they're scrolling through the homepage or the other internal pages that they have, making sure that that primary goal is top of mind versus the secondary goal or, whichever one is most important for you.
And let's say that you've done all of this again, and what have you seen that people really struggle with when they go through this process? Is it one particular thing, especially when you work with a client, that comes off over and over and over again, that they really, really struggle with this process?
That's such a great. I love all of your questions. They're so tactical and practical. Yes, the number one problem and the number one, and I wonder if you find this too in your work with clients, of defining who they're for. I often hear, well, I'm for everyone, or I'm for this person, and this person. And as I think about the functionality of your brand and really what we believe at Witt& Company is that it should be supporting you and reaching your right audience. Your right audience is not everyone. The clearer you can be on who you're for, the more intentional and strategic your brand can be. Because dependent on if you're serving new moms versus if you're serving corporate executives, the messaging is going to be different. The personality that you want to use to attract those types of people will be different. The visuals that you use will be different. So every other component and all of the elements that go into your brand are affected by your target audience and who you want to attract.
Yeah, I love that. And I've seen sometimes with businesses, they don't want to turn business away,
Yes.
especially as they're growing. So they're like, well, we can work with everyone. The problem is when you want to work with everyone, sometimes you end up working with no one.
Yes, exactly. And I often think, we forget that it's a two-way street. The ideal client, or not even the ideal client, thinking through like the functionality of your website, someone can go to your website who doesn't necessarily fall into your audience, and they are still empowered to make a decision of whether or not they want to take that next step. I use myself and our studio as an example. We specifically work with service providers, personal brands, and nonprofit organizations. But when you go to my website, nonprofit's not on there. We really call out that service provider, people who are experts in their space. That doesn't mean that we don't get people outside of that area inquiring, but that's our job, right? Is to really communicate whether or not we can support them. Yes, they might fall outside our niche and our area of expertise, but if they have a certain problem that we can still support them with, we're just transparent of this is outside of our normal realm. However, we'd love to work with you because you seem really cool, and I think we would have fun together. So it's really getting into this idea of the purpose, again, back to the purpose of our brand is to really support and position us as experts for a certain audience. And then our audience, and if someone falls outside of that, they still get to make that decision of if they want to make the next right step and what our, primary calls to action are and whatever that looks like for our business.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, before you even start doing all of that, and we talked about the rebranding, and I want to go back to the beginning. And I know I'm jumping a little bit all over because I got so many questions about this. And as you're talking, like things pop in my head. So I'm hoping that the listeners can follow my thought process here. But what are some of the techniques that you can use to figure out how other people are experiencing your brand so that can guide you to figure out like what direction I need to go to rebrand so that they can really resonate with me and my business?
Well, I think the first kind of cursor is if you're not attracting your right people. So thinking through, the last 6 months or year or 3 months, depending on the frequency of the client work that you're doing, and thinking about who's coming in and are they saying yes or are they saying no? Are they a good fit or aren't they a good fit? And that's really a great cursor and catalyst for, okay, I don't think the way that my external brand is being portrayed is aligning with or attracting my right people. And that's kind of I think, the most obvious cursor or sign that your brand isn't serving you and supporting your business. Another tangible, I think, would be to go to your website and look at your Google Analytics. Are people getting on your site? Are they bouncing away quickly? Are they engaging with your site? Are they going through the different pages, or they're just landing on one and then leaving? Where are they coming from? So thinking through that marketing in terms of how people are engaging with your website, and is it serving its purpose? Those are usually the two most common reasons that we get people coming to us: is my website's not working for me, or I'm not attracting the type of people that I want to work with. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And you give us a lot of good material here and super practical, tactical advice. But there's always this one thing that I ask every single guest on this podcast is, if someone were to trying to do what we talked about today, rebrand themselves, what is the one thing that they can do in the next week? Something tangible, something simple to get them closer to that goal.
Oh, that's such a good question. And we've been talking a lot about this, right? Is this idea of your ideal client. And that would be my number one tip: is write down who you want to be a great fit for, and the number one problem that you're helping them solve. By understanding just those two elements, that will help you get a clear foundation, or at least put you on the path of the trajectory of understanding whether or not your brand is serving you. Because if you realize who you're going to be a great fit for and what you're helping them solve, that will then trickle down into all of the other elements of your brand. And you can decide, start experimenting with whether or not the different aspects of your brand are serving that right person.
Awesome, Kelly. Thank you so much for this. Where can people find you?
Thank you so much, Kathy. This was so fun. I love talking about branding. Yes, the best place to connect with us and get into Witt & Company's world is either on LinkedIn, and it's Kelly M. Wittman. My personal LinkedIn is a great place to connect. Otherwise, our website is Witt & Company, and we have a newsletter that we send out called the Branded Chat every Friday. So that's another great place to connect with us and continue this branding conversation and learning about how branding can support your business.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show, Kelly.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thanks again for joining us on this episode of Help My Business is Growing. And I hope that this episode has given you great insights on rebranding and how you can apply it to your business, how to even start that process, because I know it can be daunting. Next week, we're going to turn the spotlight on ourselves, and my guest, Erica Kastner, is going to talk about personal branding and how it can help you effectively not just present yourself, but also your business to the world. And if you love this episode, you can find all the timestamps, show notes, blog posts, and links on my website, newcastlefinance.us. And before I go, I do have a favor to ask. If you are listening to this on Apple Podcast, if you could please go to the show and tap the number of stars that you think the show deserves. I ask that because it really helps the algorithm and it helps other people find it as well and benefit from it. Thanks so much. Until next time.